Okay, so we're going to dive right into it just because we're on a schedule. And I'm so grateful and pleased to introduce our guest speaker today. Her name is Leanne. Leanne, help me with your last name.
Ciccarelli.
Leanne Ciccarelli. Leanne has been practicing employment law from a management side perspective for 20 years. She actually works with my attorney. That's how I found her. And she's gracious enough to join us. And she's going to be here to answer as many questions as we can get in to our half-hour block. So we have until 11 o'clock Pacific. And Matt, I think, is going to guide the question answer, if that's okay. We have a lot of questions from people that you submitted when you registered. And then if you have any specific questions you want to drop into the chat, please do so. Know that we're going to do our best to manage the chat, but it does get a little dicey. I think for this discussion, Matt, we might want to just have you speaking. Is that okay? And we'll just keep everybody muted to make sure that we can manage herd the cats. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely, and I would encourage people to use the chat feature during this half-hour time for any questions that you have. Costin will be monitoring that, and I will be commandeering here with Leanne.
Awesome. So
all right,
take it away, sir.
Well, I'm super excited to be on this phone call today. Excuse me, this Zoom chat today. This has been the topic of what we're doing with our staff, with contracts, with job offers for the next year is pertinent to me, and I know it's pertinent to everybody else because we are looking at the 2020-2021 school year with great uncertainty. What do we do if the school closes for a month? What do we do if the school closes for 2 or 3 months? How do we actually do that if we're not collecting tuition? How do we make sure that our staff is compensated? What are the best strategies for that? So I'm going to start off by saying your employment law and the way in which you're approaching your staff is going to vary by state. I'm in California. We have different laws than we do in Mississippi or we do in Florida. So just keep that in mind as well. So we're going to be speaking in generalities. And the second thing is I also want to recognize that schools offer different types of employment agreements with their staff depending on the school, and it's really up to your school culture. Some people do job offers. Some people do staff contracts. Some people operate year-round. Some people operate for an academic or a conventional school year. So we're going to try and speak to the group in the best way that we can to provide your resources, and we'll be providing you Leanne's contact information at the end if you'd like to follow up with her. One thing that is important, especially moving into these uncertain times, is that you do have a counsel you can trust. This is not the time to wing it and just kind of hope for the best, because there will be a time, I think, in the next 12 months that you will be relying on what you have in writing with your staff, what you have in writing with your employees, and figuring that out now, I think, is one of the best uses of your time. So with that said, Leanne, I'd like to start off with, what do you think the benefits of a job offer agreement versus a contract are? What are the benefits? What are the negatives for each of the scenarios with our staff and employees at a Montessori school?
So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm happy to join you guys today. So yeah, every state's different. Obviously, every school's different, but as a fundamental principle, I mean, a contract's a contract. So what's in your contract, you're going to be bound to it. So you want to be careful with that. And while historically you might have always done it a certain way, we are in very unique times, and you need to make sure you're recognizing that in your agreements. So an offer letter, is a little, it's an easier format, an easier structure. It's still binding terms though, right? So whatever you're putting in either document, you need to make sure you're going to be able to live up to the spirit of that agreement. That agreement can also have provisions that talk about clauses of why, if you need to shut down, you have to have the contingency planning in your contract or your offer letter. Give yourself the flexibility in the terms of that agreement to make whatever changes based on these business needs. Again, we see it every day. People are going to say, but it's, what do we do next month? And what happens now? We're all in uncertain times. Your contract should reflect that same principle. It's, again, I know things were different in the past, and I know we are all expecting contracts, in your conversations with your folks, but guys, we're in a unique situation. So this year we kind of got to roll with it. It's being candid with it when you have these conversations as well as to why you're making the changes, and that it's for everyone's benefit. To Matt's point, if the school's not collecting revenue, we can't pay people. So we need to have that flexibility, but with the intention that we're going to get back to business as usual as quickly as we can.
Okay. Is there any difference in a state that is at will versus not at will?
Yes. So, so contracts are a funny thing. So you can still make a contract at will. I can have an employment contract with my employee that says I still reserve the right to terminate you at will. If I do, certain things might happen. I might owe you severance, or I might owe you something else. But if you're if you're in a non-at-will state, which there aren't very many, most states are at will. It's basically, it's similar to functioning as a contract. You can't fire somebody without cause, or death or disability or other provisions. So a non-at-will state functions like a contract, basically. But at-will employment is a powerful thing. And you need to preserve that at-will relationship to the extent you can. Again, you do want to give some assurances and to get people to work for you. So I understand needing to put important terms into a contract, but you still need some flexibility to get out of it, especially based on what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, could you clarify, just for, we have such a broad group of people on this call. Some people have a school in which they're the teacher and they don't necessarily do a lot of business functionings. And then we have people who have large schools. So what is the actual definition of an at-will terms?
Okay, so at-will means that I can, either the employee or the employer have the right to terminate the employment relationship at will at any time, with or without notice or cause. So the added section for the legal term of it is, except for an illegal reason. So I can fire you at any time, but it can't be for an illegal reason. It can't be discriminatory. It can't be against public policy. But it generally means that they can quit, or I can fire them for any or no reason, with or without notice.
Okay. And an at-will provision could be in both a job offer or a contract?
Yes, it can. Yep.
So you could have a contract, which is, I think a lot of people are used to having those in independent schools, with an at-will provision in there, which says you can end this earlier than the time being.
Correct.
Okay. How would that work? What do you think the best practice would be if you were closed? Let's say that we had an employment agreement, or either a contract or a job offer, and it was at will. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that November 1st, our school is going to be closed until January 1st. At that point, would you terminate the employee? Would you furlough the employee? How would you approach that?
So different states.
In expectation that you would want to hire them back when you reopen.
So with the expectation of wanting them back, the difference between whether you're going to lay them off or furlough them. So a layoff is an immediate termination of employment for purposes of a definition, right? It's a defined term. A layoff is a termination for purposes of like unemployment insurance and other reasons. A furlough is an employer imposed unpaid period, or an unpaid time off, unpaid leave, a leave of absence. It's for a finite period of time. It also functions for unemployment purposes as a qualifying reason for getting unemployment. The actual difference, though, the only difference between a layoff and a furlough, functionally speaking, is the continuance of benefits, of health insurance benefits. So if you're terminated from employment, which layoff falls in, your benefits cease the last day of the month that you're terminated. If you're furloughed, your benefits continue. So that's where it gets a little tricky, because so in your example, Matt, if the furlough is going to last 60 days, you need to check with your insurance carrier, your plan, your broker, to see how long someone can be on an unpaid leave of absence, which a furlough is, and still be eligible for health insurance. Most carriers right now are saying you could keep them on. Because the argument being they're not eligible anymore because they're not working full-time. You have to be a full-time employee to get benefits. But carriers are like, we understand furloughs are going way longer than expected, so we're going to let people stay on the plan. So that's the function of a furlough. It's to keep people on an unpaid leave of absence where they still get benefits and they're expected to come back at a certain time. Layoff, same thing, except they're expected to come back at a certain period of time, but they're not going to get benefits during that period for health insurance purposes. In California, as a side note though, however, if the furlough lasts longer than 10 days, it is considered a layoff and you must pay all final wages, including PTO and blah, blah, blah. So state laws might vary, and when a furlough actually rises to the level of a termination, but it's meant to be an unpaid leave of absence.
Okay.
So for my suggestion, again, so it's a budget issue. Can you continue their benefits for those 60 days? If you can, for continuity purposes and, you know, just morale purposes and taking care of your employees, if you can, I would suggest treating it as a furlough because you're more likely to get them back at the end of that period.
Okay. What do you think the best practice is? So for us, and I'm sure this is the case with a number of other schools, for health insurance benefits, which is a huge benefit and it's a huge expense for us, we have, you know, the employee contributes a certain amount and we contribute a certain amount. How do you collect that money for their portion? Let's say this is 30 or 60 days. What is the best practice for making sure you're collecting that money when they return?
So the first thing is make sure you talk about it before the leave starts, and it's up to you, but the options are twofold. It's either they pay you outside, they pay you their premium outside of payroll, or you agree to deduct it upon return when they're back. So you're kind of holding it. So, but
Okay.
if you can ask them to pay their premiums though, and they would just have to pay it outside of payroll, send in a check, like as if they were on COBRA, basically.
Sure. It can get really expensive. I know with the number of employees that we have, we're talking about, you know, $10,000. And does make me a little bit nervous thinking about, you know, we're fronting this money, especially if that goes on for 2 or 3 months, that could get quite onerous.
It can, and it's hard to track it down. And that's why too, again, that's why I said, if you can, a furlough is great. If you can't, that is why you would choose a layoff route though. And you would call it a temporary layoff with the return of service date expected to be in January. You know, you put it in a letter, and that's why that is exactly why you pick a temporary layoff terminology, is to get out of the mess of the benefits, because it can be messy.
Sure. If we are continuing the benefits through the furlough scenario, is the money that they're contributing, if they're writing us a check, is that still considered tax deductible to them? Because I know that it's pre-tax when they make that through their paycheck.
It's and because they're just basically paying you, it's just dollar for dollar.
Okay. So we probably have, and I know we have some NIDO members here who have already initiated and signed staff contracts for the next school year. What is the best practice for either modifying those or changing those, given the new situation that's at hand?
So I would hope that the contract has an amendment provision or a modification provision that says the parties can amend, and you would just do an addendum to it. It sort of depends on what's in the contract already, but hopefully you have the right to amend it.
Okay. And does this differ? So we have a number of, usually our Montessori teachers are going to be salaried, and then we will have hourly people for a lot of our support positions or assistant positions. Are there any changes in the way in which we should approach this between exempt staff and non-exempt staff?
The real key is if you're going into a furlough or a layoff with an exempt employee and its impact, so the salary exempt folks, if it's hitting, if you're going to have them work part of a work week and not a full work week, you actually owe them salary for the entire work week. So you just need to be careful for payment issues when it comes to exempt employees. And if you're going to be adjusting exempt employees' salaries, because I am seeing that kind of across the country. One of the alternatives is just reducing salaries. If you're reducing salaries for exempt employees, just make sure you're still above the minimum threshold for FLSA, so the federal side, but be mindful, again, our friends in California and New York have a much higher threshold, so you have to do the higher threshold. Don't destroy the exemption by pulling them too low, but you can pull their salary down. You can't do it all the time though. What I mean is the FLSA, the DOL will say, well, you're not treating them really like an exempt employee if you're adjusting their salary every 3 weeks. But you have to do it once because you need to, because of a business reason. You absolutely can. Just don't make a habit of it. For your hourly folks, you can also reduce their wage. Just make sure it's not below minimum wage. Look to your state minimum wage. And also you still owe them overtime if they're working overtime. So that's the only difference when you're treating with those employees is don't mess with the exemption in pay. And if you're doing a reduction, be careful on the threshold.
Understood. For all of the people that are watching right now, I want to remind you that we will be sending out a recording of this video because I know we're throwing a lot of information at you.
Yeah.
So don't feel like you have to furiously write everything. You're welcome to take notes, but you can go back and rewatch this if there's a certain discussion point that we referenced that you didn't get all of it. So, Qasim, do we have any questions that have come up in chat so far?
We have quite a few. Yeah, some of them we touched on. Donna asked, what are our obligations to employees who are afraid to return to work? Do we have to keep the jobs? Do we have to offer FMLA? In Arizona, we've been advised to offer letters that state salary by payroll, not by year. That was a lot, sorry.
Salary by payroll, not.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Donna, can you clarify? And then in the interim, maybe we'll just address the, what are our obligations to employees who are afraid to return to work?
Oh, the afraid to work is an interesting part right now. We are, being afraid to work is not protected. Having an underlying health condition that puts you at risk for coming back to work could be protected. So if someone says to you, I'm scared of coming back to work because this whole COVID thing, it's going to blow up in our state. I don't want to come back. The response is, why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Well, I'm just scared I'm going to catch it. Or I'm just scared because I see things all over the news. Okay, I understand that, but I need you to do your job. Is there something, we need to talk about on that? We're going to do safe practices. We're going to be cleaning. We're going to do all the things that we can from an OSHA and a CDC perspective. I kind of need you to perform your job. If they're just flat out scared, that's not protected. However, if they say, I'm scared because I have an underlying health condition, I have serious asthma, it's been said all over the news, all over the CDC guidance that because I have serious asthma, if I am to contract COVID, I am at risk of suffering more and potentially dying. That's why I'm scared. That right there is the ding, ding, ding. It now puts you into the ADA interactive dialogue category. Now you have to talk about it some more to see whether or not you can accommodate their underlying condition. COVID is also not, by the way, COVID itself is not a disability for purposes of ADA because it's temporary in nature. The underlying condition of asthma might be. So it's an interactive dialogue. You have to take it case by case. You are not, so for the FMLA side, to that point of the question, it also depends on the situation, but generally speaking, if my underlying condition of asthma has been exacerbated because I have COVID, and now I'm going to need to go, take treatments and be on an ongoing, treatment plan or seeing doctors, then I could take FMLA leave for that. So for those of you that are, under the threshold, sounds like most of you are for the Families First provision, where you get the emergency FMLA and the paid sick leave, that's also a potential. But again, if they're just scared, none of that applies.
And what if they, what if they live with someone who's high risk?
It doesn't, they're not your employee.
Got it.
So, but they had to take care of them. So that's, if you look to the Families First provisions and somebody that they take care of has COVID, then there are protections for that, but not just, I don't want to come to work because I'm scared they might get sick. That's a family choice. And this is where it gets a little tricky too, because it's like, I understand you have choices to make for yourself personally, but that's not what the intention of the act was. So the EFMLA, as a reminder too, that the emergency portion of FMLA is limited only to childcare needs, period.
Interesting. From a practical standpoint, I'd really love to reiterate with everybody that's watching that this is where the power of relationships really transforms a lot of this, because if you have good relationships and close relationships with your staff, a lot of these things can be worked out much more casually than going down this road of all these provisions, which I try to avoid like the plague as much as possible.
Yep.
Leanne, have you seen any movement coming out of it at the federal or state level about indemnity for businesses in terms of catching COVID when you're working here as an employee?
Yeah, so if you, right now the guidance is if someone catches it at work, that you're supposed to submit it as a workers' comp claim. And potentially it's an OSHA reportable incident for OSHA reporting purposes, but I'm curious to see what the carriers actually do about it when they get their influx of workers' comp claims. but that is the next wave for sure. And it is the guidance that if somebody says, like I just had yesterday, my COVID call yesterday from a client out in Ohio. The guy, again, back to relationships with the employee came in and said, I tested positive for COVID. He called, he didn't come in, let's be clear. He called and said, I tested positive for COVID. I didn't get it at work. I got it from my cousin. And so that way they were, I mean, he was honest about it, but had he said, I got it from Joe, who also works on the floor with me, he hasn't told you, but he's COVID too, then it could be a workers' comp situation.
How did they even prove that though, where you contracted it?
I think because his cousin was sick, he was like, no one else at the plant has been diagnosed at all. He's the first one, and he knows his cousin is sick. So he's asymptomatic, and he just deduced that. But you're right. Sometimes you just don't know. So if somebody says, to you guys as employers, like, I know I got it at work. How do you know that? I mean, okay.
Yeah.
You could potentially,
exactly.
And if that's the case, then I would put it through as a workers' comp claim, and then it's up to them. It's up to the carrier to decide. But if somebody's adamant that they got it at work and you can't otherwise prove or disprove, I would put it through the the workers' comp process and let them sort it out.
Understood. Qasim, what other questions do you have?
A few questions related to that actually is, can we have them sign a waiver of liability? And is there any other risk to the employer if somebody does get sick with COVID-19 at work? Can they claim negligence or anything like that?
That's why you have workers' comp. I mean, that's it. That's all there is to it. It's workers' comp as an exclusive remedy, except in Texas, if you don't carry comp, and I strongly suggest you do, even though you don't have to, but carry comp and put it through the carrier. That is your protection. You can't have somebody waive liability. It's the same as saying, asking them to waive liability for getting hurt at all at work. You can't have them do that. That's the purpose of having comp.
A question from Christina was about language for contracts that haven't yet been signed, but leaves options for COVID. COVID requires closure. And I think what we're talking about.
COVID. Yeah, exactly. That's the language you would be considering. That's what you would be trying to draft, is language that says, based on unforeseeable business needs, such as a COVID-related closure, the school reserves the right to, or may have to lay you off, and in which case, I mean, you spell it out.
That's helpful. And Leanne, this is stepping outside of employment a little bit, so forgive me and feel free to bat this away, but what if a child gets COVID? Is that?
So you would have the paid sick leave, the emergency paid sick leave under the federal law, Federal Families First. Mm-hmm. And it's that one, I think, I can't remember if that's 2/3 pay on that particular one. It's 1, 3, 5, and 6 or whatever. But you look to Families First, and it's paid dollar for dollar as a tax deduction. So even though you, the employer, are paying the paid sick leave, it comes off as just a straight off tax deduction when you go to remit. So yeah, you'd get your paid sick leave, and then if you otherwise offer paid sick leave. But to your point, does that mean like I can't come to work because likely yes. I mean, I've now been exposed, so I need to take the paid sick leave too. So both are qualifying reasons.
What about a student at this school? Is there any risk to the school if a student contracts COVID?
It's the same as reporting a coworker. It's the same as, if you have a kid that shows up with, when you report now, if there's a sickness, you have an obligation to, tell people that might be exposed that there's a potential exposure. And
that was actually my question. I know that there had been some legislation talked about at the federal level about indemnifying all businesses from anybody that's a staff member, that's a parent, that's a child, if they contract COVID at your school. Have you seen any movement on that?
I haven't yet, but I would expect it. I would expect it as well, because that's kind of the nervousness. But as this continues, as we get more testing, as we get more data, my sense would be, the law will catch up to it the way it has others. But it's the same as, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying that the disease itself is like the flu. I'm saying it needs to get to a point that the reaction is, our response is similar to what we do when anyone's sick with anything that's contagious. What do you do in those circumstances? This is heightened 100% right now, but the reality is, if someone sends their kid to school with a flu or with RSV or with bronchitis and they cough all over everybody, there's no liability there. So it would be outrageous in my mind to not allow that same indemnification to apply.
Leanne, we have a question about using employees' PTO when paying salaries. Is that, sorry, what are the rules there?
I think the example, Leanne, would be like, let's say that we did have to close for a period of time. And you are either laying them off or furloughing them. I know that if you're laying them off, you have to pay them out their PTO. Could you force somebody to say, hey, we're going to be furloughed, I'm going to use your PTO to pay you, even if you don't opt into that?
So for state by state, first of all, California, you have to pay it out. Other states you don't. So it depends. But in certain states, the better recommendation is that if you can, that you make it a choice to apply. You don't have to allow them to apply PTO. Take California out of the mix. You don't have to let them use their PTO. But if you choose to say, you know what, I want them to use their PTO because it'll help their financial burden and you can afford it, you can afford it. So you're saying, I'm allowing you to use your PTO, make it a choice, because they might not want to. They might say, you know what, I stockpiled, I'm saving my PTO for my vacation. That's when I budgeted it. The difference being, this is what employees will say, well, it's my PTO. Why don't I get to use it? The response is a furlough is an employer imposed leave of absence. It's not an employee chosen leave of absence. I'm putting it on you, which means I can say it defeats the purpose. If I don't have a budget to pay you, I need to reserve the right to say yes or no, you can use your PTO, because I might not have it in my budget.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 3 minutes left. I want to let everybody know that Leanne is here. She's donated her time to us. So one, I'm really, truly grateful to you. And if you don't mind, Leanne, talk briefly about if somebody wanted to engage with you, what that would look like and what to do.
Sure. And thanks again. I know we probably had a million more questions and I'm sorry the time is so short. I'm happy to talk with anybody offline if you'd like to reach out to me and engage me through the firm I'm at is Weiss Brown. I'm happy to, if you guys want to share my contact information with the group, if you post it on your site, that's probably the easiest way to do it. But happy to help and engage with anybody if they so need it.
Well, I just posted Leanne's a link to Weiss Brown that includes Leanne's contact information in the chat. That also went out in the email. Gosh, I think we have time maybe for one more question.
Yeah.
No, excuse it through. Matt, do you want to do the honors since I can't think of one?
No, I don't have any other questions. Is anything else come up in chat, Qasim?
I think we've covered most of the ones that I can understand, and everybody forgive me if I skipped over yours. I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best to interpret. Leanne, I'm getting a bunch of thank yous in the chat. Everybody,
pop up there too. You're so welcome. I hope I gave you some helpful insights here. I know it's a tricky area and it's going to continue to be tricky, but as I tell all my client companies and all the folks I'm working with, the reality is with time, we will have more information on all of this. And it's just really important to keep up on the daily news, whether it's through ordinances or whatnot, but it is changing. And I feel, it'll get there for the better. We just have some catch up to do, but we'll get there.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. And just to confirm, the call is going to continue to go on after you drop off. So we'll be able to talk as a group if any other questions come up.
Feel free to kick me out because I don't know how to, you got to put me in time out.
I don't know if I know how to do that either.
I'll figure it out. I think I got it.
Oh, somebody's asking what states you work with.
I have clients in all states. So just real quick, my background, as I mentioned it earlier, was not on the call, but to the guys. I was general counsel for a payroll company that operates in all 50 states. So my job as general counsel was to stay compliant in all 50 states with all employment laws. So I practice in Arizona, but I can consult in all states with respect to any and all HR matters.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Great.
All right. And we will continue on our conference. Thanks so much for joining us, Leanne. We really appreciate your time.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was very, very fast. That half hour flew by unbelievably quickly. We'll continue to offer experts as they come on. I do want to have somebody come on about contract law for our enrollment agreements. That's a separate type of attorney. And we're looking into options for that as well. Wanted to give everybody an update. We are thinking and starting to plan our reopening here in California. And some of the things, I don't have a specific date, but Governor Newsom has come on and said that he expects schools and preschools, childcare centers, et cetera, to be open within, quote, weeks and not months. So I'm starting to think about what that looks like. And I wanted to share two things that I'm thinking about doing right now. Number one is I found these thermal imaging cameras that are a little bit pricey. They're about $2,000. However, I think it would be a great investment for you to consider, especially if you have a school of over 50 children. And what we're planning on doing is having this at the front desk of the school to be able to, what it does is it recognizes your face, has facial recognition technology and an infrared camera, and immediately gives a temperature gauge. And that's something I was just thinking about logistically. If we had to take the temperature of every single staff member and every single child at the beginning of every day, that's going to take an hour. I mean, it's going to be crazy, let alone having to clean the thermometer each time. So for $2,000-ish, I felt that it was a good investment to be able to have. And I think it does give parents peace of mind when they're coming in that we're taking this seriously and that we're monitoring temperatures very, very clearly. This is going to be with us for at least the next year. And so I think that the investment is worth it if you have that within your budget. I'm happy to share some links with you offline about companies that I found that offer this. There's a number of different companies that do. So that's number one. And number two, I've been looking into these electrostatic cleaning machines. So rather than having to go in and disinfect classrooms and take 2 or 3 hours of doing that every day or every week or whatever, this electrostatic machine actually puts out kind of a fog, and it dries within 10 minutes, and it sterilizes the whole room because the actual particles are charged and they stick to surfaces automatically, and it dries, it's non-toxic and all those things, especially in our NIDO environments, especially in our toddler community. I think that could be a huge time saver moving forward. They are difficult to source right now, and I'm still trying to work with vendors to find them. However, that's something I would encourage you to look into as well right now, just in terms of logistics, in terms of, again, how we are sanitizing our environments, but also, again, we want to project to parents and staff that this is a safe place to be, and we are doing what we can in order to make it safe. So consider looking into those two things. And then third, one of the things that I'm talking about with my elementary director right now was starting school early this year. We're thinking about coming back in July. I'm tossing it around. The reason I'm thinking about doing that is because I want to have a lot of flexibility for the next school year. We're not going to modify our existing enrollment contracts, which start in, I believe we start school August 19th. I think we're going to offer, just for lack of a better word, you know, instead of a summer program, we're going to offer a 5-week summer session of elementary, because we've been off since March 16th. If people wanted to come back early and pay separately for that, in addition to their contract, which starts on August 19th, I think we'll have a lot of parents jump on that. And also, I think that it does really smooth the transition and builds your community in the event that you're going to be closed for a 4, 6, 8-week period, potentially, over the course of the 2021 school year. So that's what's been on my mind for the last week. And I'm wondering what other questions. Ooh, somebody just put a little link there for a machine. I'm going to check that out and we're done with this. But let's open it up to the community for questions that we have.
Matt, we've got one from Ann that's been seconded and thirded. A lot of people have said yes. We also want to hear about this. Ann DeMott, she said it would be great if we could touch on how to handle payments from parents on students from 2020 to 2021 in consideration of potential school closure.
I think I would want a little bit more clarification on what that question means.
Okay. Ann, are you available? Can you unmute and help guide us? Sorry to put you on the spot. Laura and Kelly also mentioned being interested on that as well. So if y'all want to chime in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you.
I apologize. My connection is not the best, but thank you. Yeah, our school is pretty small. It is private, and I guess I imagine a lot of teachers in different types of schools might be wondering how to allow in the enrollment paperwork or make a statement in paperwork closing. This year it caught us off guard. We had to figure out, who might really need a reimbursement of tuition because it's early childhood. And I was working I don't know if you can still hear me. Yeah, okay. I was, yeah, I am sending them things from home and working with them and in touch with them. I know that doesn't totally make up for the fact that it's not what they paid for. And so I imagine every school will have to decide what their policy will be, but I would love to hear what other schools might be, or other people might be thinking about kind of stating, and if there's any advice, you know, how to adjust enrollment for that.
So you broke up just a little bit when that question was being asked, and I just want to clarify. Are you talking about what we would do in this upcoming school year if we were closed so that they're doing at-home work, but we're continuing to charge tuition? Is that your question? Uh-oh, did we lose her?
I've lost Ann.
Okay.
Brent said that is my question.
Okay, well, I can let you know what I think, and then I think I'd love everybody else to chime in. I think that this is, listen, you go through a honeymoon period at the beginning when this thing hits and everybody wants to support and do the best. I think that's going to be a much different tone when we, you know, in the fog of war, when we start to realize how long this thing is going to go on. And I think parents may be less apt to want to do that. So I'm not taking that approach. I'm going to have something, an expectation set, whether that's a contract addendum or whatever, about what specifically happens when we're closed. I'm not planning on charging tuition, which is why we need to adjust our employment agreements with our staff in order to reflect that. I will say, however, that there have been schools that have been on these Zoom meetings that have actually successfully implemented, you know, at-home learning in a variety of ways and continue to charge tuition, whether that's full tuition or a reduced rate. So maybe we could open that up to the community right now for discussion. Feel free to jump in.
I don't know. I don't know if on the go forward how the families will feel if it happens again in the fall and again next spring, but we stayed with our tuition as is. We pivoted to online learning. Our children are 3 years old through 8th grade, and the families by and large have been supportive. 100 or about 200 families, they've been supportive. Now we have offered financial assistance to everyone who was impacted financially, and had some negotiation with just a couple of preschool families who felt like, you know, hey, this is not what I paid for. But by and large, they've been good. And I hope to stay with that next year, but I don't know.
Monica here in Napa. I just, on the Montessori admin Google site, I just posted a survey that a group of us put together yesterday. And in the survey, one of the questions was kind of asking our community if they had any ideas of what they'd like to see. And I offered like 3 suggestions. You know, I offered like, would you like to do homeschooling at a reduced tuition rate if we were to close? Would you like to have a 2-day on, 3-day off so we have less children at school with home learning happening? Or would you like to just continue as is because we're just under guidelines in the state of California? And then I put a place in there where they could actually make a suggestion on their own if they had any other ideas of something that they might want to see. And that way, at least I have some ideas of what my parents are feeling about it and what the community is thinking about as to what might work for them. And, you know, ultimately I have to make the final decision, but I just thought to have that parent buy-in in the conversation might be helpful.
Yeah, and Monica, thank you for sending me that email yesterday. You sent me a copy of that survey. And Qasim, I'd love to put that out in the follow-up email that goes out so that people could see Monica's great survey and use that as a template or use it for themselves. Because I do think part of this is not going to be a completely command decision on our end, right? We have to have buy-in from our community, and they may have some suggestions. They may have some direction in which we could go that would, you know, support them. And I think we have to be flexible in these situations. So thank you, Monica, for doing that. It was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Connie in Dallas, Texas. We have remained open and moved 100% to what we're calling our home learning plan. It's been very successful. Certainly a Herculean effort to get it out the door in a timely way. We didn't have any difficulty collecting tuition for this year. Our last tuition payment was in April, and all families certainly asked questions about tuition reductions or refunds, but were very supportive based on the home learning plan that we created for them. Not easy for everyone, but grateful, and feel the feedback has been very strong that the value, was we recreated an experience very similar to their experience on campus. We have stayed away from using words like our school's closed. Instead, right now we are in home learning, and there will be a time when we're back in on-campus learning. Our plan for next year is to, again, remain open. There may be times where we are fully in on-campus learning. There may be times when we are in social distancing measures, which might be and we'll be working on what that looks like, but it might be an A day, B day, where the students are split in half and they each, they only come on certain days. I'm not super excited about that plan, although I'm keeping it on the table. The other option right now is to look at our physical space and reorient so that if we have to move into social distancing measures, that we would, basically extend classrooms. We are fortunate, we are a school that both adults in the classroom are experienced and trained Montessori teachers, credentialed Montessori teachers. So we could, in theory, split a class in half, have them running side by side with an adult in each class, still keeping with ratios. And then if we do go into an on-campus or campus closure situation again, then we will move back into our home learning plan. So thankfully, we put a lot of front-end work into the home learning plan for the remaining school year. It ended up being a 7-week plan. Our faculty and staff put many, many hours in to make it work. I set the expectation and journeyed along with them every step of the way that it was going to be high quality and mirror what we did on campus. That has set us up for being very ready. It wasn't why we did it. It was, I was strictly thinking of, we cannot afford to close our doors. We can't afford to lose tuition right now. And so our home learning experience needs to mirror what's happening at school. So when it became obvious that we might be in this situation again in next school year, then we have now started to build teams to work over the summer, to take our whole year-long scope and sequence and align it to be able to easily switch into home learning should we be in that situation again.
Connie, is there somewhere we can go to see more information on your home learning plan?
Yeah, I will be happy to share it, and Qasim, I think probably most effectively through you, I'm guessing. I will say that it's not as organized as I would want it to be if I would start with somebody. Right now, it's all getting moved into a Google Drive folder, but I will happily share what I have and just ask for your understanding that it really isn't ready for public consumption. But
Totally understood.
to answer questions or any kind of support that we can provide, we would be happy to do that.
I just chatted you my email. Brent said we'll take whatever you have. What age groups is your school geared around?
Thank you. Yeah, we start at age 3 and go through middle school, and have a fully functioning home learning plan for all levels, including our primary classrooms.
That's great. And thank you so much for that, Connie. And I will echo this idea that none of this is going to be something that we want to do, right? We are doing the best we can. So thank you so much for that. Do we want to open up to a different question that's come up from the community?
Qasim,
yes.
go ahead, Qasim, can I just follow up one quick question for Connie? This is Wally.
Hey, Wally.
Connie, I just want to know how your program, distant learning program, is working across the different levels. Have the middle school been more successful than primary, or what have you seen?
Yeah, certainly the middle school was the simplest transition. Literally, we just moved our curriculum online, and at that age level, the students' technological abilities is very high, and so it was not a difficult transition. Honestly, for the faculty and staff, the biggest challenge was lower elementary. That is such a high level of concreteness is required, and a very low level. We do not really expose children to technology until upper elementary at our school. And so it's been most difficult for the teachers and probably most difficult for the parents at the lower elementary level. But we've done lots of wraparound supports to help everybody, including, the teaching staff, and getting them all on the same page. I will say one of the things I did very early on, and we have 2 classrooms at every level except for middle school, we have 1 classroom. And very early on, I realized I needed to put my leader hat on. And in a scenario at our school where we often collaborate and work together to make decisions, I realized very quickly that I needed to be the decision maker. And so it's uncomfortable for me, but I might take a little bit of input here and there, but mostly I'm just making decisions based on all of these different trainings and webinars that I'm participating in. And so I made a decision that the primary curriculum and the lower elementary curriculum needed to be 100% in sync. And so it was difficult because, in particular in lower elementary, our 2 classrooms approach to the curriculum implementation has been very different historically. It's something I've been working on. I'm in my 5th year at the school, been working on bringing them in alignment. And I just put down a date and said, by this date, you all are going to be doing the same lessons and the same scope and sequence. And so they rose to the occasion. I was really surprised, something that we had a lot of tension around over the last few years, and a lot of, I don't mean tension like arguing with each other, but tension in trying to figure out how to do it. It just, once I took decisive action, they came along. From the student perspective, I think primary has had the most challenging engagement, strictly related to the screen, which we totally get. And actually our technology guidelines as a school is no screen time for children in the 3 to 6 age group. And so we recognize that we're departing from what we believe in, but we have continued to feel that this is better than nothing. And so we have moved forward with it. And I've just said to parents, do it in whatever way you can. We're using the Google Meet platform, and all of our teachers are asked to record every lesson, and then we post that recording. So if a parent can't sit with their child through the lesson in real time, they can go back to it and give them, or sit through that lesson with their child at a time that is convenient for their family. And then the other thing that we did, Wally, for success was we put together a home learning kit that included materials. We did not send Montessori classroom materials, but we sent materials that they could make. We figured practical life, especially for primary and lower elementary, they still need fine motor work. So we sent them all sorts of things that then were built into the curriculum that children had to make, either as part of the preparation for a lesson or as part of the follow-up work for a lesson.
Connie, we have a question here about whether or not you're paying your staff a full salary as they continue to do lessons and plan to over the summer.
Yes, everyone is still on full salary. The expectation during home learning is that they are still working typical hours. I do in the first, what are we? We're in week 5. No, we're at the end of week. Yeah, we're at the end of week 5 right now, sorry. In the first 4 weeks, I did a staff meeting every morning and every afternoon, very brief. It was, usually our staff starts at 8. I started at 8:30. Usually our day ends at 3. I had the end of day staff meeting at 2:30. And so for 2 reasons. One is I felt we all needed that structure. And the other reason is I felt we all needed that connection. that opportunity to express what we're feeling and how things are going and all of those types of things. And so the morning staff meeting was more structured. The afternoon staff meeting was more reflective.
Thank you for that. It sounds like Lise mentioned that she has a well-performing program as well. Lise, if you want to share. And then Jim mentioned the guidepost remote learning that we might want to touch on. And is Lise still here? I think I
Yep.
might have seen. Oh, awesome. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, it's very similar to Connie's. We did the same thing. We unrolled it immediately. We put out a guide to our parents to explain what this was going to look like, what they were expected to do, what the students were expected to do, how we were going to partner with them to make this work in this time. And then the teachers worked extremely hard and are still working hard because we don't end until May 28th. And so they have been doing lots of different things. They have one-on-one lessons with the teacher, with the children. They have one-on-ones with the parents in parent forums, in Zoom. Everything has been organized in Google Classroom, everything from toddler up. The toddler teachers created a blog. We created a central spot where parents can look at a calendar if they have children in multiple levels to see where they need to be, what they need to be doing. There has been small group learning and individual learning for the primary levels. The toddlers, it's mostly teaching the parents how to do it at home with those children because you can't get them to get on Zoom unless they are having a circle time or story or song or something like that in a group. Elementary through adolescent, we go through 8th grade. The work is individualized, of course, to them, what they need to do. The teachers are having very consistent meetings, plans for each child, connection with the children. I mean, it's all absolutely in place like we would do at school. It's created a lot more work for our teachers, but it's been extremely successful. We haven't had much pushback about tuition. The biggest thing is just that everybody wants to make sure that we are going to open again come fall, which we are. Normally we have a summer program and now we're starting to get desperate pleas for us to open in the summer, which we haven't yet decided to do. But we're looking at a very similar path of what Matt had mentioned, opening earlier. At first we thought, no, we're absolutely not going to do that. We don't want to mess up our first day of school. We were concerned that if we did open too early, you might have some cases where you'd need to do a clean and close or close school again for an extended period of time. But now we are considering opening earlier again and phasing the children in. Although at this moment we're looking at August, we haven't really discussed going into July yet based on our area and the restrictions that are in place there. But anyway, if anyone wants to contact me after, you're welcome to, because I have to say, I think we've done it really well and it's really working. It's very well organized and the parents have all the information they need and all the contacts that they need with everyone, including the administration. So we're also doing parent forums with the whole school as necessary and with groups of children with the administration, just to make sure that everybody's doing well where they need to be.
Nice work. Qasim, what other questions do we have?
We have a question about Guideposts product, their curriculum, and if anybody's used it and how relevant it might be for other schools. I don't know if they let other schools utilize it, but if there's anybody with Guidepost here, let us know.
I've got it pulled up on my computer and it looks like it is really kind of leaning towards parents who want to homeschool and then doing this in a Montessori method at home. They have a distance learning ages 6 through 12, calling it Guidepost at Home option for students. They have distance learning 0 through 6. And that one seems to be a private network for Montessori parents and educators of children 0 to 6. But I don't know if they're charging for this or.
Here's my fear. I'm the evil marketer in the room, so everybody forgive me for saying this. We actually know the folks at Guidepost, and they're great folks. They're building schools in every major city. And if we're driving students to them, what they're doing is they're list building. So if they do allow you to use their tool, I think that's great. If I were them, I wouldn't spend all that money building that thing and then not email those parents later when I open up a school right next door to yours. So for what it's worth, forgive me for, immediately going towards my capitalistic tendencies, but that's what I would do. Did I just offend anybody or everybody?
No.
Okay.
Qasim, you're forgiven for being a capitalist.
I was going to say that I heard that they were working with other schools, but I don't know what the offering is. Or maybe that was just something they were considering. I haven't looked into it.
It's true. I'm a parent where they're building a couple of schools. I have a 6-month-old who's hanging off of me right now and a 3-year-old as well. And I got a call from them asking if I wanted to enroll in their online program and then enroll in the school. So it is a feeder program for them.
Absolutely. That's how they operate. And Holly, you can confirm that unfortunately and anybody from Dallas can probably confirm, unfortunately they come into a community with beautiful schools and then they hire people without any training and become a daycare with a Montessori logo. And I was telling Jim, they bought Montessorium. I think they've been planning this online stuff for a long time. I've known Ray and his team for years, and they have more money than God. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is build networks.
Y'all, we've got 4 minutes left for the call. I'm going to post another poll. I've gotten the feedback that we're not necessarily touching on all the topics that everybody wants to touch on, which is difficult given the size. Curious as to whether or not this was of value. Matt, you mentioned another legal discussion around enrollment agreement. Should I go track down another attorney? And then if there are other topics that we want to touch on, please feel free to drop them into the chat and I'll update the poll.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm working on right now, and I'd love to discuss when I have it built out for myself, is how we're doing virtual tours. I think that's a whole separate conversation, and we really need to be able to give direction to our admissions managers or you, if that's who's doing it, about the best practices for that, because this should not be a time in which we're completely shut down. We should be able to continue to bring people into our school in anticipation that we may have openings when we resume full operations. So that's something I want to focus on, but I'm interested in what the rest of the community would like to discuss specifically. And again, I think it's important that we have a topic and a theme for each call, with ample time given as well for things that come up. So maybe the first half hour is about a topic, and then the second half hour is more of a community forum to vent and problem solve as a group.
Are people giving tours? People having enrollment or doing, obviously school's not in, but are you showing in facilities and things like that?
I actually gave my first one today. Sorry, it's Christina from Virginia. And yes, what my assistant has done is put together a very beautiful slideshow of the different spaces in our school and children working in them, a couple of little videos. And I gave a Zoom call where I did exactly what I would normally do, minus the observation in the classroom, and it went beautifully.
Nice.
This is Wally here, Matt. Regarding the virtual tour, I did discuss with Qasim. We did have one lead from there, and it was basically in the form of a phone call. But then after that, things just dropped. I mean, we haven't had any more inquiries after that, and I wasn't sure exactly what may have happened and why.
Can I speak to that briefly? We run ads for, it was close to 40 schools before people started closing or pausing their ads, and we saw a strange anomaly in the ad traffic. The interest dropped by about 10 to 20%, depending on the geography. The conversions dropped by 80 to 90%. What that tells me is parents are actually still looking, because they're still searching for these key phrases: Montessori school near me, best Montessori school, what to do with preschool, etc. But they're not taking the actions that we offer them, because the actions that we offer them are immediate. Come in and take a tour, download our tuition, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So what we've advised our schools to do is start offering conversion actions that are longer term. My favorite right now is the Parenting at Home Handbook. But give them something that speaks to their immediate needs, and then just start building your list. That way, when we are able to open up, you have an email list that you can go to saying, hey, I've got 3 open spots in my X program if you're interested or available. So the interest is still there from a traffic perspective, from a data perspective, but the conversions have just fallen off a cliff. I've never seen that before, but we've never been in, you know, a COVID-19 situation before. So right now, that's the way we're advising people to approach that.
Great. And Qasim, I think we just hit our limit in terms of our allocated time. I look forward to seeing everybody here next week. Please do take our poll so we can address your needs in our upcoming meetings. And again, thank everybody for taking an hour out of your day to come and be with us, to support each other so we can all get through this and emerge stronger when this is over. And it will end soon. Not soon, it will end. I don't know when, but it's going to end at some point. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all next week.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye.